Hashtag Trending would like to thank Meter for their support in bringing you this podcast. Meter delivers a complete networking stack, wired, wireless, and cellular in one integrated solution that's built for performance and scale. You can find them at meter.com/HTT. The EU orders X to preserve records as Grok nude picture scandal grows. The backlash is growing about Grok's sexual images. Retailers push to compete with Amazon's successful AI tool. Low Earth orbit gets even more crowded as China plans to launch 200,000 satellites. And how to ensure your cell phone isn't used against you at a demonstration. Welcome to Hashtag Trending. I'm your host, Jim Love. Let's get into it. The image generation tool built into Grok, which runs on X, has kicked off a serious international backlash. The issue arose from Grok's uncensored generation of non-consensual sexualized images, often of women, but increasingly there are reports of these pictures featuring images of children. All of this moves out of the realm of online mischief and straight into criminal territory in many countries. The EU has issued a rare order demanding that X preserve all relevant records, including internal communications, as a prelude to an in-depth investigation. But other countries are weighing in as well. In the United Kingdom, the reaction has been fast and blunt. Senior politicians and regulators have publicly condemned the use of generative AI to create sexualized images without consent. UK officials have made it clear that existing laws apply about child sexual abuse imagery and non-consensual intimate images, even if the picture was generated by software rather than taken with a camera. Regulators are actively examining whether Grok's outputs cross those legal lines, which puts direct pressure on X. Indonesia has gone the farthest so far, blocking access to X altogether over the issue. There are also reports that Australia and Canada were looking at possible action. In Canada's case, that has been publicly walked back. The federal minister responsible for AI said Ottawa is not considering a ban on X, pointing instead to existing criminal code provisions that already deal with child exploitation and non-consensual intimate images. At the platform level, X has quietly restricted Grok's image generation feature to paid subscribers only. The free version of the image generation software was simply listed as busy. But the company hasn't explained if this was meant as a safety control, a way to reduce volume, or simply a business decision to exploit the huge popularity. What we do know is that the change came after public outrage, not before it. Elon Musk, for his part, has brushed off the backlash, framing it as political rather than acknowledging a failure in how the tool was controlled or rolled out. Elon Musk, never one to admit a mistake, for his part has just brushed off the backlash, framing it as political rather than acknowledging it as a failure of moderation or control of the software. This issue might not go away. There are reports that images most people saw online are not the worst of it. Several outlets cite moderation gaps and internal warnings suggesting that even more disturbing material was being generated, including images involving children, before controls were tightened. That raises serious questions about whether safeguards were working at all or whether they were simply overwhelmed. The controversy reached a particularly ugly moment with the case of Renee Good, a woman who was killed during a demonstration in Minnesota. Her likeness was reportedly turned into a sexualized bikini image and circulated online. For many critics, that became the line in the sand. A real victim, posthumously sexualized, with no consent and no way to push back. Taken together, this marks a shift. Governments are no longer debating theoretical AI risks in this area. They're reacting to real harm, unevenly and often under public pressure. But the question now is whether platforms like X can prove that they can control powerfully generative tools, or whether regulators are going to decide that they've already lost their trust. Amazon recently gave the retail world a pretty clear wake-up call. The company said its AI shopping assistant, Rufus, is on track to generate about $10 billion a year in additional revenue. That figure came directly from Amazon's executives, not analysts, and it helps explain why competitors are suddenly accelerating their own plans. Rufus answers shopping questions in plain language, comparisons, recommendations, and those "is this right for me" moments. And Amazon says shoppers who use it are far more likely to complete a purchase. But AI isn't just changing how we shop. It's becoming a battleground for the biggest tech companies and the biggest retailers. And that battle was on full display this week at the National Retail Federation Conference in New York, where the industry's biggest annual gathering takes place. That's where Google and Walmart formally unveiled their new partnership. Google's Gemini AI is being integrated directly into Walmart's shopping experience, letting customers browse products, get recommendations, build carts, and check out through a conversational interface without jumping between apps or search results. Google also used the NRF stage to talk about a broader push, working with Shopify and other retailers on a shared AI shopping standard. The goal is what the industry calls agentic commerce. That's where AI assistants don't just suggest products, but can actually carry out the purchase for you end to end. Microsoft, not trying to be left out, is making its own play with Copilot Checkout, which allows users to shop and pay directly inside the Copilot chatbot. To make that work at scale, Microsoft has partnered with PayPal, bringing payments into the AI flow. And Microsoft is careful to say this isn't about cutting retailers out. As Kathleen Mitford, Microsoft's corporate vice president of global industry marketing, put it, "It's their data, it's their customer relationship, and that's something that's really important to us." And PayPal has framed the partnership as a way to help merchants become AI ready, so discovery and checkout happen in one continuous step. And Microsoft doesn't want to lose in this. They've struggled to demonstrate broad consumer adoption of Copilot so far, and Google appears to have scooped them on Walmart and Shopify. And this message of Microsoft's, that the retailer data will belong to the retailer and not Microsoft, introduces at least one of the issues, privacy, that is sure to rear its head as this trend accelerates. The other issue, of course, will be the potential for manipulation of the consumer, both in choice of goods and prices. With Amazon showing that AI shopping assistants can drive real results, not just engagement, Google, Walmart, Microsoft, and PayPal are now positioning themselves so they're not locked out of the next phase of retail. It's worth thinking back for a moment with nostalgia to a time just 10 years ago when low Earth orbit, that band of space between 160 to 2,000 kilometers above the planet, was relatively quiet. A few government satellites, some research missions, not a lot of traffic. And that changed quickly with SpaceX and Starlink. Last week, SpaceX received approval to launch another 7,500 satellites, adding to the thousands already circling the Earth. Low Earth orbit, or LEO, is attractive because it offers low latency and stronger signals, but it's also a finite space, and it's filling up fast. Along with Amazon and others who are trying to get their satellites into orbit, China is now signaling how big this race could get. The country has applied to place up to 200,000 satellites into orbit over the coming years. Chinese officials have described Starlink as a collision risk and say their plans are partly about protecting national interests and space safety. How adding more satellites makes it safer, I'm not exactly sure. But even if that number is aspirational, it gives a sense of scale that will fundamentally change the orbital environment. All of this raises concerns about congestion and debris. Low Earth orbit isn't empty space in any practical sense. Satellites are traveling at roughly 28,000 kilometers an hour, and even small fragments can cause serious damage. Once debris is created, it can stay up there for decades. And this isn't just a story about superpowers. Canada has a stake in this too. Toronto-based Kepler Communications is building a satellite network designed to move data around the planet in near real time. Kepler's system focuses on data relay, allowing satellites, spacecraft, and ground systems to communicate more efficiently. This has clear applications for defense, space operations, and secure data movement. Systems like this open the door to space-based data handling, perhaps not replacing Earth-based data centers, but potentially reducing some of the load. In theory, this could mean less reliance on massive ground facilities that consume large amounts of energy for power and cooling. And it's early days, but it's one of the reasons governments and commercial customers are paying attention. Kepler recently launched additional satellites aboard a SpaceX rocket, which underlines another reality of this moment. Even competitors and even countries with their own ambitions are often relying on the same launch providers and the same crowded orbital lanes. The big shift here is simple. We've gone from treating low Earth orbit as a sparse, carefully managed resource to something that's closer to a shared infrastructure. What's lagging is coordination, clear rules on spacing, collision avoidance, and responsibility when something goes wrong. Because once low Earth orbit becomes too cluttered, it doesn't just get harder to clean up. It gets harder for everybody to use at all. As protests of all kinds seem to grow larger and more frequent, smartphones have become an essential tool. People use them to organize, communicate, and document what's happening in real time. But according to PC Mag, that same technology can create risks many demonstrators don't fully anticipate. So much so that they recently published a guide focused on cell phone safety at demonstrations. The underlying point is simple. Phones don't just connect you to your friends. They also broadcast information about you, who you are, where you are, and sometimes who you're with. And tracking you and your communications is relatively easy. IMSI or Stingrays trick nearby phones into connecting to what appears to be a regular cell tower, but it can allow others to collect identifying information or intercept certain types of traffic. You don't see them, and chances are you won't even know if your phone is connected to one. So PC Mag's advice starts with some basic steps. Disable biometric unlock features like Face ID or fingerprint scanning. Use a PIN instead. Biometrics could be compelled by legal authorities. A PIN you've memorized generally can't. They also recommend turning off location services, closing apps that might broadcast your identity or location in the background, and reviewing permissions before you leave home. To ensure that your communications aren't intercepted, there are encrypted messaging apps like Signal. Signal encrypts messages end-to-end, meaning only the sender and receiver can read them. It also offers disappearing messages, which automatically delete conversations after a set time, reducing how much data is left behind on your device. For those who want to be even more careful, PC Mag recommended using a separate burner phone at demonstrations. And this doesn't have to be anything dramatic. It could be a low-cost Android device with only essential apps installed. The idea is to limit how much of your personal digital life could be exposed if the phone is searched, seized, or even compromised. And given the potential for a phone to be knocked away or even confiscated, not having a high-end iPhone or other expensive device might be a good idea. And of course, there's the etiquette of making sure you don't publish photos of others. Anyone can use tools like facial recognition, video analytics, and other forms of digital tracking, even for those who aren't using a phone and who may not want to be identified. For those of us who are old enough, it makes you nostalgic for the times when you brought a baseball hat, a protest sign, and maybe some sunscreen, and a quarter to phone for a ride home. God, I'm old. And that's our show. Once again, we'd like to thank Meter for their support in bringing you this podcast. Meter delivers full-stack networking infrastructure, wired, wireless, and cellular to leading enterprises. Working with their partners, Meter designs, deploys, and manages everything required to get performant, reliable, and secure connectivity in a space. They design the hardware, the firmware, build the software, manage deployments, and run support. It's a single integrated solution that scales from branch offices, warehouses, and large campuses all the way to data centers. Book a demo at meter.com/HTT. That's meter.com/HTT. I'm your host, Jim Love. Have a marvelous Monday.